Okay, today we're going to be looking at the squirrel pattern. So yours will look a bit neater than this, but here. So the first thing you want to do is get your pattern, get some freezer paper. So freezer paper is matte on one side and it's shiny on the other one. I don't know if you can see that. You want to draw on the matte side. So basically, hold it over your paper, trace around all the main shapes. So you want to go all the way around the squirrel and attach the tail to his body so he doesn't go wandering off. Don't worry about the eye. You want to cut out the nut, and on this little bit here, he's got a little white bit, so it's a bit of his tummy is just showing here. So draw all the way around the squirrel and then cut that one out. So here he is. The one I prepared earlier. So here he is here. And I've included that little bit. And so what you want to do is separately trace that out. And then cut that out of the cream fabric. So I'll just show you there. Or just put that on top. Now if that's a bit too fiddly, we can always do that with a cream colour thread. And likewise, I want to do the same thing for his nose. So let me just put him over here. So I cut his body out of this very nice batik, so it's a kind of a nice foxy orange. And this bit here is his mouth. Oh, it's kind of nose area. So pop that on there. Like so. And the rest we're going to do with embroidery. Okay, let's just put him to one side. So the other bits to cut out are your poppy. So on the pattern I've drawn these out separately. But there's the poppy to cut out. So cut out the whole shape. I can work out which way around that goes. Like that. Including the green bit at the bottom. And then we're just going to do the same thing and we're going to layer them up. I can find all the bits. So we've got one bit of corn, a little bit at the top there. So you can see that. So I've done those out of a cream. And then we've got some poppy heads. There we go. And we're not worrying about the stems. We're going to be embroidering the stems later. So, and what else have we got? I think I've lost a few little pieces here. And so somewhere there should be a little green bit here. So it's for the pattern, just at the base there. But I seem to have misplaced my somewhere. Oh, there it is. I see it underneath the ironing board. Okay, so I'm just going to layer those up at the bottom, like that. Okay. It's easier if you layer them, because then you don't get a gap, because that's always the problem. If it's once you start cutting tiny little things out and they shift, you're going to get a little gap and see your background. So here, if it shifts a little bit, it might not end up being quite the way you want it to, but you're not going to get a big gap, which will look a bit odd. Okay, so that's all our pieces. Oh, and he's got a nut as well. Okay, so we do those. So you want to cut all those out. So if you haven't used freezer paper before, so you draw on the matte side, you take your fabric, and I have the iron on kind of cotton, normal steam, just gentle ironing level. And you gently press your freezer paper onto your fabric with the shiny side down, and it will just stick to it. It's not really sticky, but it will hold long enough. And then you cut out round your shape, peel it off. So here you can see here some of the ones that I've drawn out here. You can see. I cut with embroidery scissors. I just cut out the rough thing and then I cut it out once it's ironed on. But if you want, you can cut it out like this. Put that on your fabric, iron it on, cut round it, and it gives you a really nice shape. So the next thing we want to talk about is stabilisers. So this is a stabiliser I really like to use. So it's a cutaway one and it's lovely and thick. So you get different types of stabilisers. You can get dissolvable ones, which I don't like, but some people do. And you can get tearaway ones, which are like a papery one. Let's see if I can find a bit for you. So these are more commonly used when people are doing, digitalised machine embroidery. This tends to be what you use, and it's like paper, and you can tear it in all directions. And it works very well if you need to get it out. So because the needle perforates it, and you basically just tear along the lines afterwards. On the downside, because the needle perforates it, if you're doing a lot of work, it can actually start falling apart as you're sewing it. So if I don't need to take the stabiliser out, then I use this one, which it's like sewing on a very fine piece of felt, but it's very nice to sew with. So that's what I use. You want to cut out your background. So the finished embroidery, depending on what size you're doing, but the one I'm doing is around 8 by 6 inches. And then you make sure you cut out your fabric at least that. Here you can see I've cut mine out about 8 by 8. I think it seems to be quite a square piece. So that's a mid-tan background. And here's my stabiliser, and just make sure that your stabiliser is as big as the embroidery. You don't want to run the risk of popping off the edge there. So I'm going to put him, making sure, quite close to the edge. So when we trim this down at the end, we're going to be cutting right up to his tail. So I want that near the edges of my fabric, so I've got enough room to get everything else in. Okay. So you just arrange your pieces, and then we can, up to you, you're reasonably happy with it. You don't have to arrange them all as you go if you don't want to. I tend to just put them all on and make sure I'm happy with them. So here you can see I'm just peeling off this one. And just be careful when you're peeling it off. It helps to have fairly reasonably long fingernails. That kind of just goes over there. And just lay it out according to the pattern. That's it. There you go. I think that's actually his nut there. I seem to have lost his nose, so we'll find that will appear in a minute once I found it and cut another one out. Okay, here we are at the machine. So you want to put your free motion foot on. So this is what mine looks like. Fluffy. Okay, so they all look different, depends on your machine. Some of them are metal, some are plastic. Some people just use like a needle which has a spring on it. This one's mine. Mine's a FAF Performance 2056. It's my machine. So you put it on, make sure it's properly fastened on. They have a tendency to work their way loose and then come off and break your needle for you. And then put your machine into whatever settings you need for free motion. So for mine, there's actually a free motion button that I press. And I also like to put the needle, so the needle goes down automatically when I lift my foot up off the machine. If you haven't got that, then you need to get good with some foot controls, because if you can just, when you leave the needle in the fabric, just while you pause, it just stops you getting little jumps. You might need, if you haven't got a proper setting, then you need to set your stitch length to 0, and you need to put your feed dogs down. If I put mine up, down. If you can't do that, then some machines have like a darning plate that you can put over it, and that, like a little piece of plastic that goes over here. Or if you haven't got that, you can go old school, get a piece of cardboard, make a little hole in where the needle goes, sellotape it on, and that does the same thing, just to stop. Some people actually like to leave the feed dogs up, but I find it, you don't notice it particularly, and then suddenly it'll just catch and it'll pull you in the wrong direction, so I find it much better with the feed dogs down. Okay, so here's all our fabric. Mine seems to have got a little bit creased. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're basically going to work our way around, stitching just in from the edge. So I'm going to start at the tip of his ear here. Right, my hands aren't in the way. Okay, off we go. So what I like to do is a couple of stitches and then, well, if I can find my scissors. No scissors. Yeah, I've got no scissors. I have so many pairs of these scissors and I can't find them. Here we are. Right. Before you start, make sure your scissors are to hand, and I'm just going to trim off this bit. Okay. Try and get my feet round the tripod again. Okay, so cut your thread off as soon as you can. Once you've got enough stitches down to hold it, get that end trimmed off, because otherwise what happens is because of the way the foot's shaped, the thread's going to come up through it, and then you just sew over it loads of times. So and it's difficult to get out. So we're just going to whiz down his face. Take care to stitch along the edge and follow those curves, because some of those curves are helping you position where eyes and noses and things like that are. Okay, now I've said I'm just going to stitch along here, but I've actually gone up a little bit. Just change the camera angle there. I've actually gone up a little bit past where the end of his jaw was, just to help define it. Okay. And we're just trying to get all of the shapes down so they can't fall off. Sometimes if I'm going on for smaller shapes, I've just done both. I've just gone back and forth, and that's the 2 lines done, and that nut's finished now, so we don't have to worry about it. Okay, now on here it's actually very better if we just put his fingers, claws in now. So I've got, trying to get 4 in, so just zigzagging back and forth. Because if we stitch around the outside, that's going to look a bit funny. Okay, now here I'm going to zigzag a little bit, make that, because this is the kind of base of his arm here, and we're going to carry on across there. Okay, and then round up there, so that's just a little bit of his tummy there. Okay, now you can see what I've done here is I've stitched all the way around, and I'm going to have to sew a second line before I can, because there's no way out unless I cut my thread off. Okay, so you do get to places like that. Okay. If you ever want to turn the fabric, you can do, just make sure that you don't wrinkle anything up. Sometimes I find it's helpful to turn it, just because otherwise it can hit the arm of the machine. So I'm just stitching all the way up his tail. Also, if you're doing straight lines, it is actually easier to have it fairly well lined up, so that you've got a smooth line to go with your hands. Okay, and then back up his neck, and there's little zigzags here to make him look hairy, so you might as well put those in as you go. Okay. Okay, right, so we've gone all the way around him. So now we're going to put in a few more details as we go. So start off, we don't need to worry about the tips of his ears, because we're going to colour those in with a different coloured thread later. So let's whiz down to his nose. Taking care around those shapes. Now for his nose, we're just going to put a little suggestion. I very rarely put mouths in, so don't worry about mouths. Okay, here we're going to go up past the jaw, and down, and then across, and that's just made it so he now looks like he's got 2 arms here. Okay. Go back into those fingers, and you can you don't need to take them as far. Not fingers, are they? Dear, my anatomy is terrible. Claws, must be claws. Paws. Right. Okay, so let's get that elbow in. So down, back up again. Now I've just hit the side of my machine there, which is why it didn't go properly there. Okay, and then we're just going to put in that suggestion of that other. We've just got the top of his other leg there. Okay, and then back round. Okay. Now chances are this edge here we're going to trim off later, so you don't need to worry about being too neat across there. Sometimes I don't bother sewing it down, because I know I'm just going to cut it off, and there's not a huge amount of point. Okay, around his ears. Okay. Now here we're just going to whiz down, and we're just going to put a little bit of a suggestion of what's going on in his ears. And again here, we're going to go down. Right, so while we've got the brown thread on, oh I should have said that, we were using mid-brown, which I have lots of, if I know the reel of it. So this is my, I can get it in shot, that's the outlining thread. I've got that on top and bottom because I use it a lot. So I buy it 10 reels at a time, so. Okay, we're going to go over, and we're not going to worry about stems. Because if you draw stems in brown, they stand out a lot, so it's nicer to use a green. Okay, we're going to go around these. Keep your finger on so they don't shift. I don't like to use Bonder web, so but I do get my fingers, as long as you don't. My phone's making funny noises. As long as you don't put your finger inside there. You're not going to sew over it. This is a nice little guard. If you're using a sprung needle which has no guard, do be careful how close but you put your finger. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go around the shape first. As soon as we've got our thread, as soon as we've got the thread secured, we'll just trim off that so we can't go anywhere. So round, up. Now on some of these smaller shapes, because I'm trying to sew near the edge, it's very easy to miss. I've missed in a couple of places. I'm not going to worry about it, and I'm not going to go back straight away to go over it. I'm going to rely on the second time going round. That's the time we're going to catch it. Okay, so we're going to go around here, because otherwise it just adds extra layers and it really points it out. So I'm just going to sew in some of the details this time. So we're going to add like a kind of loopy star to kind of suggest some of the details at the top of the poppy head. That's what these are, if you don't know what they are. Okay, and then over to the second one. This time the thread's quite tight. In fact, what I've done, I did that without thinking. I've just added in the top of the poppy seed there to start off with. And it really doesn't matter exactly what they look like. You're giving enough for people to know what it is, hopefully. Okay, so next one we'll do is the bottom one. We'll do the poppy. Now I've got this here, this little sheath of corn lying on top of that piece there. So we're just going to go around again. My fingers are in the way, aren't they? Just concentrate on getting all the fabric down and sewn as neatly as you can to the edge. Following the shape, so if it's curved or it's got a corner, then you follow that. Okay. Keeping your fingers so that now here we've got a couple of little layers here, so we've got the green, mine's just twisted slightly there. We're just going to bodge that back in again. This is such a small piece, so if yours bodges like mine, by the time you've sewn over it a couple of times, no one's going to know that it was a bit tucked, or it's got a runcle in or anything like that. Okay, around the green bit, around again, okay, round up. Right, okay, so we got round once, so now we need to add in some petal detail. The lines are drawn in on your pattern. They're just, I say this a lot, it's just suggestions, impressions. That you don't worry about trying to follow exactly where I've put my petals, because there's all kinds of flowers. So it really doesn't matter. So mine won't look the same as I've drawn it. Okay, so we're going to make that first petal look like it's rolled over a little bit. Okay, so now we go up to the next one, around the top, and then we're going to have a big petal here. And again, I'm going to put a little dip around there. So just make that one look like it's rolling over. Okay, and we're going to go up to the middle here. Just putting that one there. And here we're going to put a little dip and then back up again. And that just kind of makes it look like it's fallen over at that point. Okay, so that's that one done. Okay, I'm just going to, normally I try, where possible, I try not to break my thread off just because it's less ends. Okay. So we're going to do that here because I don't want to have to sew all the way around just to get back up here when we could just do it. Now on your sheath of corn you need to put in the grains. So just kind of make it so the one after they're just stepped as best as you can. Okay, so that's kind of how I'm doing. I do mine just one side, the other, one side, the other. They're just stacking up together, and do your best at the end. Okay, and that's all nicely secured down. So the last one to get down is at the top. I've got another bit of grain that's just it's going off the top of the picture. So we're just going to go around twice, and same thing. We're just going to add in the grains. So what else have we got with this colour thread? We need to trim it down. his eye. Oh, a horrible bit to the eye. Do not fret, it will be okay. So you can map it out in chalk, would probably be a good one for this colour. Or a light pencil line. You can, if you want, you could take your freezer paper if you've still got it left, and you could cut the eye out and then iron him over the top so you've got like an eye hole. You can hold it over and mark it with pins, or you can just have a go, which is what I tend to do. So what I do is I just put my needle in, and then I have a look at the picture and see whether things okay. And what I think it's roughly in the right place. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw the oval of the eye, and that's all, just once round, okay? Okay, so at this point I've hardly got any stitches in there, and I can have a look here and say, is that in the right place? Is it the right size? And if it isn't, then lift up your needle, put it back where you think it should be, and have another go. Don't worry about trying to get rid of those stitches. We can cover those up later. And so just do as minimum amount of stitches to try and get it in. If you think it's too small, go round and make it bigger. Okay, if you think it's too big, do a smaller one. Just use this effectively as your kind of pencil and sketch it out. But try and use a small amount of stitches, because the more you stitch over, the harder it gets to sew through. And you're going to get a big thick bit. So we're just going to trim all these down. In fact, I don't really need to trim it all down. Don't worry about the back. And we're going to change over to a I'm going to use this one. It's a variegated brown. Okay, so it's a little bit lighter than him. Okay, so my machine is threaded with a different colour. I've turned down the tension a little bit because this thread seems a little bit thicker than the other ones, so it seems to like a little bit more. So we're going to be bold round here, and we're going to put his tufty ears in. And they do have, red squirrels, they do have ridiculously tufty ears, so you just have to, be brave and really extend past the embroidered bit that the applique bit that you've done. And just colour it in slowly back and forth. I always feel a bit silly when I'm doing this, but it is what their ears look like, so. And we'll just put a few lines down here as well. Okay, and then what we'll do is we're gonna go around some of the shape, just making him look a bit hairier. Okay, so I'm gonna put in here, and you just got to kind of make this up really. But I'm just putting a kind of jaw line for his head, so there's a bit of a division of where his head is from the rest of his body. And by doing it in the very closely matching thread, is not nearly as bold. If I get it wrong, it doesn't matter so much. Okay, next we're going to go over to his tail, and we want to do kind of sweeping curves to suggest of the way that his fur's on his tail's going. Okay, so round, because he's got his curve. If his tail would be over this side, it just doesn't fit in this embroidery. Okay, so it's round flat tail. Okay, just end off a little bit, and then we'll go over and we'll put a bit here under his chin. So I'm just going to fill in this a little bit. There we go, and then drop down to the bottom of his arm. I think that's probably okay for that. Right, what else have we got? Okay, eye. So I'm happy with the shape of that eye, so what we're going to do is we're just going to circle it a little bit, and I'm going to trim off that loose thread there so it's out of the way. Okay, so we're just going to loosely circle the eye, so around we go. On the last go round, I like to kind of feather it out a little bit and just point this bit here down towards the bit on his nose there. Okay, so a little bit of feathering, and then we'll just bring the lines a bit closer around his actual eye socket. And depending what thread you use, you might want to go round again with a light thread just to really highlight that eye. But this variegated one I've picked has just gone into, just whilst I was going around the eye, it's gone really nicely into quite a light colour so I'm going to pick that as my final go, but if you wanted at this point you could go around. Okay, right, next one, I'm going to change the thread over again, and we're going to go to a dark brown for his eye. Okay, so I've changed over to the dark brown, and we're just going to colour in his eye now. So as soon as you can, change over. There we go. Sorry, as soon as you can, cut off that loose end. Watch out with your tension, because I've just, I need to turn it up a little bit for mine, because I've got that back to the normal threads I use. Okay, and just kind of circle and colour in this eye. Watch out that your foot isn't loose enough. You're just trying to colour this in as much as you can. Sometimes I do actually cut out a piece of fabric here and put it on. So you want the, but then you have the difficulties of it shifting and stuff, so I quite like just colouring them in. Okay, so there's his eye. You want to colour in until it all looks pretty uniform, and then do no more, because every bit you do extra makes it so that it makes it very thick, and we need to put in a little bit of highlighting in there, so I don't want it any thicker than I need to. So we're going to leave that for now, and we're going to change over to a green thread. Okay, so next we're going to, I've got this variegated green, as you can see. I like my variegated threads. And this one's quite a thick one, so I've just turned my tension down again. I'm going to draw in some of these stems. Okay, so nice and slow so it doesn't bunch things up. Okay. Before we start doubling back on ourselves, I'm going to get rid of that thread so it's easy to get rid of. Okay, in fact, I'm just bringing it down to where the poppy flower is. Okay, and then we're going to go up, and this one is going to go over the top. Now poppies don't have straight stems, they always look a bit drunk, so don't worry about making them straight, they'll look better if you have a bit of a wiggle to them. Okay, so slowly up and down. And we'll just finish that here, and we're going to put in the other ones to kind of work out where that other stem might have reasonably passed behind that flower. We'll just draw it there. Be very careful at the edge here when you go back, because it's very easy to make it bunch up a little bit with the tension. Okay, so the last bit of green we've got is the actual flower stem. Okay, so that's all our green, so we're going to change it over now to a beige, well, grassy straw colour, so that's the one I'm going to use. Okay. I tend to put my needle in here, so I've got the cream threaded up. I tend to put the needle in at the top of the straw. Yeah, okay. And we're going to just stitch down. Visualise when you want to go a long way on these things. Visualise where you want it to finish. Okay, so don't look where you don't want it to go, because otherwise that's bound to be where you go. Okay, so stitch enough just to get just turning it so I can get that thread out. Okay, so look where you want it to go and aim for it, okay? And I'll do that another time, I think. Okay, right, what other bits of straw have we got? Let's have a look. Okay, so we've got this one. I'll just zig back and forth there. Put in the other side, and that's going to go in front of the flower this time. You just have to pick whether you want the stems to go in front or behind. I try and make sure that you have some in front, because it's very tempting to make it so that everything is beautifully lined up and nothing crosses, but it's not very realistic. And it'd be lovely if you found your pretty flower and there was nothing in a field with a squirrel and there was nothing in front of it. So we'll put this one so it goes behind. So this is just a bit of grass this time, so maybe there's something. So just keep skipping over the bits that you don't want to do. I'll just put a little bit of a curve on the top of that. Okay. Right, one last thread change and we're going to go over to a cream. Okay. Okay, and I've got my cream threaded up. You do have to, for these embroideries, you do unfortunately have to change your thread colour a lot. But you do get very quick at it. So we're going to just add in the, you know, I need to learn some of the names of these things. They're kind of hairy bits that you get on these. so we're just kind of follow each of the grains that you put on and then kind of just zigzag back and forth. This is a terrible way of describing it. It's hard. I have to show you. Okay, and follow on to the next one. I've got my tension set quite loose here because I haven't bothered changing over. And we're going to go up the other side now. And don't worry about these. They're going to look. They don't have to be neat and tidy. They're not supposed to be neat and tidy. The whole point is that they're not neat and tidy. Okay, and then up on here, do the same thing on this one, even though it's going to be going. Ooh, so a bit happy on the foot pedal there. Okay, so that's those done. I need to trim them down. So last things we're going to do. So I think I said I wasn't going to, but I think I am. We're going to just outline the eye. Okay, so take your time, slowly do the eyelid. Okay, and then we're going to go and just jump a little bit. I'm going to put a little highlight in, so we're just going to do a little kind of upside down L shape in the corner of the eye. Now be very careful here, you can hear the pull that's making, and it's very easy to knock this foot off, and if that knocks off and hits your foot, you're quite likely, the needle hits the foot, you're quite likely to break your needle, and it doesn't do your feet any good either. Okay, so I think that is everything, which is good because I've got a school run to do, so I've just had my eye on the clock, so it's a bit speedier than normal because I need to not be late. Okay, so the last thing you need to do is trim this down. I can't remember the size. Well, it depends which size you're doing, whether you're doing the A5-ish or the A4-ish, but trim it down and get your piece of felt, and then as per the written instructions, layer the two on top of each other. The felt's very slightly bigger, and stitch all the way around the outside. Missed work there, sorry. Stitch all the way around the outside, either using your free motion foot or just your normal presser foot, and then it's finished. Okay, have fun. I forgot his whiskers, so I'm just going to quickly add these on. There we are. Now try and be brave on whiskers. It's really easy to worry about them and think that they're really obvious. I just pick a cream or something light and you just have fun with them, really. Do you know, I find that animals their whiskers are bigger than you think. And start off with a kind of slow curve and curve more as you go. Don't go all the way up to the nose. Leave a little gap, and I just, oh well, you can see I just go so that I've got a couple of stitches at the end to secure, and then just move on to the next one. It doesn't mean that you get lost at loose ends, but there we go. Well, he looks much cuter with whiskers. Definitely was missing his whiskers, poor fellow. There he is. Yeah, much better. Okay, so it's a good job I spotted that before I put the backing on.